I went to school up in Vermont, Goddard College, and Dave was my teacher. He was what they call a teaching fellow, which means he had graduated and I hadn't. That's about all it meant. And he taught me everything I know. Well, back in college, he came in with this play, which was Sexual Perversity in Chicago. And I read about a half a page of that, and even at 19 years old, I said, wait a second, I've never heard this before. I've never heard this music. Every other word, I mean, he used it, especially back in those days, he was quite profane because he wrote about profane people. But it was such poetry. So what's great about Mamet, and I think he's absolutely the guy of our generation. I don't read a play or a movie script where I don't hear his voice in it. He has influenced everybody. Everybody imitates Dave. He set a new standard. And the thing, in my humble opinion, that makes him great is the poetry, first of all. He's an astounding poet. He can jot off half a page of Shakespeare, and you would swear it was from Titus Andronicus or something you've never read. That's why you don't recognize it. He could do Emily Dickinson. He could do Emily Post. He can imitate anyone. He's so facile as a writer. He's got a sense of music that few of the writers out there do. I've seen him do rewrites, and he will literally sit in a theater and close his ears and count it off. He writes an iambic pentameter, which is the voice of the poet. So it's his poetry. Secondly, he's a great storyteller. He can tell a joke better than anybody I know. Cuts to the chase. He loves brevity. And he's got some great stories in him. I've seen him, we've been in an event, something has happened, and I've seen him describe the event to someone else, and I've many times marveled the perspective that he saw. I would have told the story completely differently, but his perspective on things is always shocking to me. He's fearless. He doesn't care if you don't like him. He doesn't care if you don't like his writing. He don't care if he offends you. He's got one goal, which is to tell a story that is true to him and tell it as truthfully as he possibly can. And if you don't like it, that's just fine. He's the only man I've ever met in my whole life who cannot be bought. Categorically, he can't be bought. And I knew that guy when he was hawking his watch every other week from poker losses. And even then, he's got an astounding backbone in him. He also loves America and the American speech patterns, specifically Chicago, the center of the country. He loves that can-do attitude that Chicago has. He rejoices in the way they speak. He's kind of the first guy that ever did that in this country. And then his politics are kind of wonderful. I mean, I did this play, Oleana. We turned it into a film, too. Many people misunderstood the thing, but a lot of women were astounded that he knew so much about women. Some of the complaints that he had the female college student lodge, people told me they'd never heard it put so well before. The little things, the little condescending, paternalistic things that men do, and particularly men in authority, they were astounded that he knew that, especially since he's a paternalistic, bombastic asshole himself. He's quite sensitive to what's going on. And finally, he's a certified genius. He's as smart as a whip. Don't ever go one-on-one with a guy. He will bury you. Well, as I understand it, it was a commission, so they hired him to do it, so he didn't choose to write the story. They hired him to write the story. And yes, he absolutely put his stamp on it, as he does everything. I've asked him to write things for me, like we did a benefit at the Atlantic Theater Company, and he wrote a song. It was astounding. It was so well done. He wrote the lyrics for it. He writes children's poetry, children's poems. They're so naive and sweet. but clearly his stamp. You wouldn't recognize it. I don't think he's political. I think he's a political fellow. I think he doesn't necessarily find it interesting to put a political agenda in his work. I think he, like Chekhov, thinks that's not the writer's job. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I don't think he was commenting on, in Wag the Dog, I don't think he was talking about politics or the Clinton administration at all. He was talking about human nature. And whenever you get huge concentrations of either power or money, you get corruption. It's the human condition. And I don't know if there's a more powerful figure in the world than the President of the United States, and it's going to corrupt as absolutely as they say.